Hello, this morning I'm leveling my large lathe. This lathe is an old English lathe built by Broadbent-Schofield. It's a model BSC. It's a 24-inch swing by 120 inches between centers. It has a 20 horsepower motor and it weighs 20,000 pounds. It also, unfortunately, has a soft bed, and you can see the bed is quite worn out. So I don't rely on this lathe for doing very accurate work. I use it mostly for roughing, and especially if I have larger parts, I can do the roughing on this lathe because it's so heavy and rigid and has lots of power. It can really hog the parts out, and then I can put them on my other lathe down at the end of the shop, which is smaller but much more accurate. I originally leveled this lathe when I brought it in here a few months ago, and then I got the harebrained idea of trying to twist some more accuracy out of the bed by twisting it in the direction opposite of the wear to see if I could improve the results I was getting from test cuts on this piece of material in the chuck. And I actually did get a slight improvement, but I had to twist the bed a lot, and I thought that the slight improvement probably wasn't worth whatever problems I might be creating by twisting the bed so much. So I decided to put it back to level. And that's what I'm just finishing up today. I was trying to level it earlier when we were doing all the welding on those rock trucks, which is in an earlier video of mine. But with the exhaust fan running and the cold air coming into the shop, I couldn't get the lathe to sit still. It was really unstable with the temperature change. Now temperature in here is stable and the lathe is as well. So what I've done is I've mounted, I've set two, well actually four, two at each end, accurate 1, 2, 3 blocks on portions of the bed that aren't worn out. And then I'm using my Starrett level to get each end of the bed level so there's no twist in the bed. And I can show you, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, so this end I've got pretty good, and what I'll do is I'll just move the camera here. I'll just move the level down to the other end, see how it is. Using these levels, you always want to be very clean because they're so sensitive, even a small amount of dust. So, put them out. Let that settle in. Bring this down and have a look. Actually, this end's stayed okay. I had leveled this end previously and then went down and leveled the other end, and they can affect each other. When you move one end, it'll affect the other end slightly. This lathe is actually fairly non-rigid in that respect, which makes it easier to level because one end has less of effect on the other. When I level my smaller lathe, it's actually quite a bit stiffer torsionally on its bed, and you'd spend a lot of time going back and forth because any adjustment on one end really affects it on the other. So when I got this lathe, it did not come with any type of owner's manual, so there were no instructions from the manufacturer on how to level it. This lathe has 6 jacking screws, 4 under the headstock. You can see one is down here, the other one's kind of hidden under there, and then there's 2 on the back of the lathe, and then there's 2 on the tailstock end. And the technique I've used, this is actually similar to my smaller lathe, it's got 6 as well. And the technique I use for leveling this is taken from a Dean Smith and Grace manual, where they describe how to level their lathe that has the same number of jacking screws. And their technique, I'll go around this side. Their technique is to initially level the lathe using the jacking screws at the extreme ends. So the two on the tailstock end and the two on this end of the headstock. Once you've got the bed so that it's level at both ends and there's no twist in it, then you come over and you move the carriage right up until the edge of the carriage is just over this jacking screw. This jacking screw right now has no weight on it. And then what you do is you tighten that jacking screw until it takes some weight, and you keep tightening it until you've moved the level, say about 2 graduations. Then you go around to the other side, and this jacking screw would have no weight on it right now. Then you tighten it down until it starts to take some weight, and you keep going until you move the bubble back to level. And essentially what you've done is loaded these 2 jacking screws without retwisting the bed, and then you lock them down with the jam nuts, and that's the end of the leveling according to the instructions from Dean Smith and Grace. I've used that method on my other lathe. It's worked very well. I've leveled that lathe about a half a dozen times in its life, and that method has always worked well for it. Just check this again and see if it's moved. You can see it's moved slightly, which is not uncommon. So I'll have to adjust it a little bit more to get it level, and then I will tighten up the 2 inner set screws, jacking screws, until it's the twist is gone. After that, I'll be setting up a piece of 6-inch diameter mild steel about 3 feet long, I think, and I'm going to rough out about a foot of it to make parts for the welding fixture that I need to weld the clamshell bucket back together. So when I'm ready to do that, I will show some video of that. Thanks for watching. Bye.